is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interest, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind. Our campaign represents a true existential threat like they haven't seen before. This is not simply another four-year election. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization that will determine whether or not we, the people, reclaim control over our government. The political establishment that is trying to stop us is the same group responsible for our disastrous trade deals, massive illegal immigration, and economic and foreign policies that have bled our country dry. The political establishment has brought about the destruction of our factories and our jobs as they flee to Mexico, China, and other countries all around the world. It's a global power structure that is responsible for the economic decisions that have robbed our working class, stripped our country of its wealth, and put that money into the pockets of a handful of large corporations and political entities. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation, and this will be our last chance to save it. This election will determine whether we're a free nation or whether we have only the illusion of democracy, but are in fact controlled by a small handful of global special interests rigging the system, and our system is rigged. This is reality. You know it, they know it, I know it, and pretty much the whole world knows it. The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty in order to enrich these global financial powers, her special interest friends, and her donors. Honestly, she should be locked up. The most powerful weapon deployed by the Clintons is the corporate media, the press. Let's be clear on one thing. The corporate media in our country is no longer involved in journalism. They're a political special interest, no different than any lobbyist or other financial entity with a total political agenda, and the agenda is not for you, it's for themselves. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe. They will lie, and then again, they will do worse than that. They will do whatever is necessary. The Clintons are criminals, remember that. This is well documented, and the establishment that protects them has engaged in a massive cover-up of widespread criminal activity at the State Department and the Clinton Foundation in order to keep the Clintons in power. They knew they would throw every lie they could at me and my family and my loved ones. They knew they would stop at nothing to try to stop me. Nevertheless, I take all of these slings and arrows gladly for you. I take them for our movement so that we can have our country back. I knew this day would arrive. It's only a question of when. And I knew the American people would rise above it and vote for the future they deserve. The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. Our great civilization has come upon a moment of reckoning. I didn't need to do this, folks, believe me. I built a great company, and I had a wonderful life. I could have enjoyed the fruits and benefits of years of successful business deals and businesses for myself and my family. instead of going through this absolute horror show of lies, deceptions, malicious attacks. Who would have thought? I'm doing it because this country has given me so much, and I feel so strongly that it's my turn to give back to the country that I love. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
President Trump has restored the idea of America.
Keep America great! Exclamation point.
The Dow Jones made history today, closing over 26,000 points for the first time.
This is a standout report.
He's going to bring all these jobs back. Well, how exactly are you going to do that? What magic wand do you have?
Hand me down the walking cane. Hand me down my hat. I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. The collusion delusion is over. You're fake news. Unbelievable. So dishonest.
Mr. President. Mr. President. Pardon me, ma'am. Mr. President. Mr. President, are you...
That's enough. Put down the mic. So much winning.
Everything he does.
Every day is NASCAR.
Seems to come out right.
Donald Trump, keeper of promises.
And all it moves is just keeping time. How in the world did he learn that? Oh, Lord. Oh, I have to get away.
I am with you. I will fight for you. And I will win for you. America is winning again. With your help on November 3rd, 2020, can you believe? It's right around the corner. So you ready? Let's go. Let me hear it. Make America great again. Thank you, Texas. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to another scope. Let me get everything back up again. There we go. Hope you had a fabulous Thursday. God, it's almost Friday already. Man, this has gone by fast. Another quick week. Another quote-unquote peaceful protest a few minutes ago ended with the president. I actually like that. It's a protest. That sounds pretty good, you know. So, you know, he hit on all the other points, which is really important because you got to get that message to resonate. I believe he has another, guys, he got 4 or 5 coming up already within the next 5-6 days. This man is amazing. I'm not kidding you, man. He is just a mover and a shaker, and he is just gonna keep on going. It does, Joanne. I can't believe it's almost the election time already. Peaceful protest, absolutely. Sure looks better than the lefties, right? Peaceful protest, they say. I hope everybody has had a fabulous Thursday, by the way. And we'll coming up on the weekend. Let's all have some fun while we can, and it's still a little bit warm, it's starting to be a little bit cool, but more comfortable for a lot of people, and which is good. You know, I was thinking when I was watching the last intro of Acosta. Acosta was in Michigan too, and I was too far up front, and I couldn't go. I wanted to actually talk to him. I just want to know, why does he have to be such an ass to the president? Why can't he ask simple, normal questions? Is there a reason? Because none of his questions make any sense whatsoever. So it is quite interesting. Kind of things to get out of the way that need to be addressed. And it is also Constitution Day. Happy birthday, Constitution Day. If I had the time, I'd play the whole entire Constitution, but it's pretty long. So many things happened today. Director Ray was on the Hill as answering questions. He did talk about Antifa, Black Lives Matter. He called Q a ideology. An ideology. It's kind of tongue-tying, but you know what I mean. And he really didn't denounce it, but he didn't support it. I thought it was kind of he kind of gave those in-between answers, especially with Antifa and Black Lives Matter. And unless he is waiting for Barr to make some sort of move or the president to declare them terrorists, because this is domestic terrorism. This is the definition of what they're doing. And we really need to keep vigilant, be safe out there. Don't get jumpy, but just be aware of your surroundings, because it's really important to do so. But I really don't talk much about it, but I think I'm going to start, because I realized how important it is to bring this to the forefront. And we just, because a lot of people don't know. I've actually come across people who don't understand about the fires going on in Oregon and California. And it's really surprising. Unless they just don't have a computer, the news is not going to address any of this at all. But I'm hoping the president will take steps very soon to make them a domestic terrorist group. They are not an ideology. They are a dangerous movement. Even though their groups are small, you just got to keep track of them. They can keep track of all these people by cell phones, just like they do real other terrorists in the world. You can't hide from the NSA or anybody else. Anybody who understands this stuff knows what I'm talking about. So they are tracked in. They're trying to track the money trail. And I think it's going to go back to Soros. If not, and the Democrats. And I'm not so much on, I think a lot of people, it is really bad to hear about the smoke. Hi, bread maker. You can't even see the mountains through the smoke. My God, really? Is that bad still over there? Well, everybody be safe in those areas. Please, if you evacuate. Don't stick around. If it gets bad, like in Oregon, California, Washington, those are serious issues. I don't know where the other fires are, but just be prepared and be safe as best you can, and help your neighbors if they need it. Be kind. Oh, that's terrible. God. Well, Breadmaker, please be safe over there, the best you can. Prayers to everybody in that situation. So, on that front, I found some clips from Glenn Beck who actually talk about this. The jet stream is pulling it fast. That's terrible. Please be careful.
on, and you don't know what's true and what's not. I'm gonna try to. I want to start with the fires. The fires that are going on now. It is in Portland, Oregon. It's so bad. It is literally the worst air quality in the world today. Is in Portland.
That's horrible.
It's on fire. Now, there are those people that are saying, "Oh, this, you know what this is? This coordinated attacks." Okay, all right. Let me give you this from Law Enforcement Today. The Ashland, Oregon police chief weighed in on the Oregonian. The one thing I can say is that the rumor that these fires are set by Antifa is 100% false information. We have some leads, but none of it points into that direction. A spokesperson for the Oregon Department of Forestry.
That's bullshit right there. That is bullshit right there. And here is one that was caught on tape. Shoot. Maybe not. I lost it. Dang it. Oh, seriously? I had it all hooked up too. Well, that was it. There was videotape of people literally setting fires. It's on, probably still on Twitter, and it's on probably YouTube somewhere, or maybe even BitChute. But you also have these kind of people that James O'Keefe has uncovered, and they are Bernie bros. Like him. Now this was, I forgot this guy's name. Oh, Martin Wilsonberger. He was a Sandersfield organizer, and he is caught on tape several times saying, if Bernie loses, it's going to burn. The cities are going to burn. So they're just trying to save their own butt right now, which, I don't know. It's not going to work. It never does.
Spoke to the New York Times. We are not seeing any indications of mass politically influenced arson campaign. Okay. So we have it from the Ashland, Oregon police, and we have it from the Oregon Department of Forestry. But here's what else we have. A number of wildfires in Washington, Oregon, and California are being considered as arson. Several of the arsonists are in jail, and while they're more on the run, police are looking for them, we are told. On Wednesday of last week, troopers in Puyallup, Washington, said they arrested a 36-year-old Puyallup man caught setting fire in the brush. This was along State Route 167 in Puyallup in the median. The fire started to spread. Puyallup police closed the northbound ramp on the highway. He told troopers he was just looking for a camera. They took the suspect to jail. Another arson suspect was arrested in Spokane after allegedly starting a bunch of fires. Christine Comello was arrested after allegedly starting multiple fires in Spokane. Let's see. The officer also spotted another fire a few blocks away. This was next to an old oil drum under a tree. More units arrived. They detained Comello. She originally lied about her name, but she was wanted on a warrant for something else, so she is in custody. She has been booked for second-degree arson. Federal law enforcement source told lawenforcementtoday.com that the feds are looking into whether some of the cases are linked together and warned there could be more attacks. Quote, "We are reacting to a coordinated series of attempts to start fires anywhere and everywhere in Oregon, public and private lands, incorporated and unincorporated areas. By all indications so far, in the preliminary stages of these investigations, there is a coordinated effort on the part of these individuals to start fires in areas that are the least protected and most vulnerable, then slowly working their way into more populated areas and neighborhoods." Please take this information as an advisory for your own account and welfare, and please act in good faith with due diligence to plan accordingly for your safety and the well-being of your community. Okay, so that's from federal law enforcement. And we know we have the arrests, and we've seen the video of the arrest. So who do you trust? Well, let's go to PolitiFact. PolitiFact said, is there some evidence that these left-wing activists are responsible for the wildfires ravaging the West Coast? According to PolitiFact, no. Officials have dispelled
That's PolitiFact for you.
the rumors. While investigations are still ongoing, the fires appear to be sparked accidentally. First, says PolitiFact, Antifa stands for anti-fascists. It's not a singular group, but rather a broad coalition of activists, including communists, anarchists, and socialists, that have been around for decades. While Antifa activists have used violence to achieve their goals in the past, experts say most of the movement's organization is not rooted in any kind of physical confrontation. Still, over the past few years, people ranging from President Trump to everyday social media users have blamed Antifa for acts of violence. In Portland, demonstrations began in late May after Floyd's death and have continued for more than 100 days. Antifa activists have been present at some of the protests. On some of the several occasions, protesters have started fires around the city, but it's unclear what Antifa supporters have been responsible for when it comes to those fires. And there's no evidence that they're behind dozens of wildfires burning from California to Washington. We do know that the El Dorado fire was brought on by something that was doing a gender reveal, which has got to be proud. We do know that several of the fires were started by lightning strikes. A power line was downed in Washington State and in Oregon, but there's nothing to any of these arrests at all. So in Dexter, when the firefighters responded to a fire at the Dexter State Recreation Area, and they caught a guy, a middle-aged man with arm tattoos, lighting two fires in the bushes. He said it looks like he was intentionally starting fires to.
And that was the one I was actually going to try to show you, but I lost it. Sorry.
Add to the chaos. Are we supposed to ignore that? Are we supposed to ignore the arson in Spokane and in Washington State? Are we supposed to ignore this? They arrested a woman, charged her with arson in California near Baronda on Highway 101. She was accused of intentionally starting fires. Now, what's the update there? And who do we trust? How about Trooper Ryan Burke on Twitter that said Trooper Moorfield caught a pedestrian who was lighting matches in the grass. A citizen observed and alerted 911 after a short foot chase. He's in custody and on his way to jail for attempted arson. And then in Sweet Creek, you have a 44-year-old man arrested on suspicion of arson in the wildfire that burned nearly 400 acres. So again, I ask you, who do you believe? If you don't know who to believe, well, there's step one of what will be on the chalkboard on Wednesday. It's really critical that you know what's going on and you know how they want you to react.
Mm-hmm.
So the fun thing with the serpent is
I'm really looking forward to that chalkboard. He does a great job of doing so. Let's see. I don't know. I'm going to try this video. I have not seen it.
It's quite amazing.
Nope, same one. Okay, never mind. Just different thing. So we also have the great BLM, which it's all common sense. And when you just stop and think about it, and a lot of people don't do it, their mugshots have been posted on Twitter. And I'll have to give Jack at least a little bit of credit for not taking them down for everybody to see. They've been allowing these thugs to be posted, hitting and losing their minds in restaurants, on the street, towards police officers to show what they are. And it's really important that we all see it. It is that important, especially people who have not seen it and are not aware of what's going on. That's another important thing to look at. But here is another Glenn Beck piece for you.
I just want to check in with Elijah Schaefer. He is one of the guys that works for the Blaze, who is out at all of these protests. I've been very worried about him and all of his colleagues who are out and about. And you were in real danger this weekend. You were in 2 different locations. Rochester, New York. Is that right, Elijah?
Yes, Rochester, New York, and good old Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so tell me first let's start in Lancaster. Let's start there.
All right. Yeah, let's start there. I mean, I think probably the rest of America is as surprised as I am. A quite quaint and very beautiful and quiet city in America to fall to the hands of violent criminals. Lancaster, there was a shooting of an armed individual whose ethnicity I can say is not confirmed as black, but is a lighter skin tone, was armed with a knife after charging at police, was a mentally ill individual, and police officers clearly released body footage showing body cam footage that their lives were in danger.
Oh, the guy looked crazy. I'm glad to hear that he was disturbed, because I felt bad saying he looked crazed, but he did. I thought he was high on drugs or something because his eyes were way popped out, and he's running after this police officer who appeared to be by himself. And as the police officer is running, this guy has a large knife behind him and trying to kill him. And the police officer shoots him and he dies.
Yes, and I'm glad that you actually are willing to tell the truth, because a lot of other media outlets make it seem like this was an unarmed black guy that was somehow targeted by officers. But if any normal citizen with 2 eyes on their head could actually look at this, I mean, this was an absolute use of force that I think any American would see was justified, that the police were in danger, that their lives were on the line, and this is a man with a knife. But what we see here is that the Black Lives Matter protesters are no longer just about the black lives of unarmed people. They're about defending any type of criminal who's shot by police, and that's very alarming.
Okay, now take me to Rochester. This is the, 10th night? How many nights? 11 nights of protests so far in Rochester?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting above that, maybe about 12 now. We're talking about the interesting death of an individual who, according to toxicology, died from a combination of, this is a guy who was high on the drug PCP, had stripped down nude, was going through the streets, spitting on officers. They had to wrestle him to the ground. He had superhuman strength because he was high on drugs. Wow. And they had to put a spit hood on him. And during that altercation, he apparently went unconscious. He died about a week or so. I mean, depending on how late you go by, died while in some sort of a coma. And the reports are that he died from a combination of PCP related complications and also police blunt force during the arrest that made him unconscious, and somehow we're just protesting about that now.
I got news for you. I saw that footage, and again, yeah, I mean, I guess you could quibble here and there. From what I saw, though, it seemed like everybody knew this guy was on something. He's naked and not shivering in the snow. What these cops must see on a daily basis, and it did look like they spent maybe 10 seconds after they got him under control laughing about it, but it's gallows humor. And then the fire department and the EMS is there. It seems like they're doing fine. They're teaching something to the police officers that they didn't know. They say roll him on his side because he was apparently vomiting in his hood, and I think he may have choked, and maybe that's what put him under in unconscious state. I don't know, but as soon as anyone...
But they're going to start blaming the cops. Now, if Black Lives Matter really, really cares, which they don't, why are they not protesting black on black violence in Chicago? That has been going on for years. And they do not say one thing about it.
Figured out that he was having trouble. They were all fine. But now we're in double digits of nights setting Rochester on fire. And you were there, and it was a problem.
Yes, and I think that's where we really, truly find what some of these groups are about. Because believe me, Glenn, I'm sure you, your audience, all of us are not only against police brutality, we're against all forms of brutality. Any form of unjust murder, killing, even death, we would all stand against
all of us.
Americans. Absolutely. But we understand that, unfortunately, in the way the world works, some deaths are not only unavoidable, some are unavoidable in the terms of they just have to happen in order to save somebody else's life, like in the cases that we are seeing here, where there's a lot more to the picture. But in Rochester, I went there with no intent to defend the police or attack the police. I came in no way to attack Black Lives Matter or defend them. I just wanted to see what they were saying, what they were doing, and within a few moments of covering their...
Well, Becca in the chat says that doesn't matter, only if white cops or brutality counts. Well, they're even attacking black cops. It doesn't matter anymore to them. There is a tweet out video which has these, I'm going to call them thugs at this point, making lewd comments to black cops about their wives or girlfriends. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but it's disgusting. It's disgusting how they even talk to cops, let alone what they're doing to everything else.
Their actions of following them, I quickly found out they're not against police brutality. They're actually just against not only law and order, but against anybody who doesn't line up with their extreme far left agenda.
So we have a short clip here we can play where somebody points you out and it gets ugly. Can we play that clip?
This guy right here is a racist. He's a white supremacist and he's doxing people.
Training at the shooting range isn't always convenient. It can be expensive.
Okay. Tell me about that moment. You're in a crowd. It's ugly. Somebody says you're a racist and you're doxing people. I know you. You're not a racist. And I've never heard you doxing people, and we wouldn't tolerate it at the Blaze if you did.
And There's two officers that survived, thank God, in Los Angeles, that Black Lives Matter blocked the entranceway of the hospital, chanting their deaths. That is sick. That is just sick. And they're not only doing that, but they're preventing anybody else who needs to go to the emergency room from getting in there.
What happened?
Well, Glenn, this actually might shock you because I'll tell you, I do this full time. You know that, and people who follow what I do or know that people do this understand that there's definitely evil people out there that want to get anybody who disagrees with their agenda killed. What was different about this night that is extreme? There was a group that set themselves up as a documentary filmmaking group. They had a crew with proper film equipment, very decent clothing. They looked like put together individuals. This was a full-on crew that any individual would say, yes, that could be a Vice or a Vox or a CNN film crew. Now, what they did, and according to videotape of other journalists, they went around talking to other journalists, asking them if they were me, and they were telling them they were filming a documentary. And by other people saying, oh, that's not me, they ended up walking up to me saying, oh, hello, Elijah. And I made a mistake of just saying, hi. This is a very professional-looking crew.
Yeah.
And right when I said hi, they turned around and called me a Nazi and curse words, which I cannot repeat on air. Immediately had men come over who had comms on. They started threatening my life. They started assaulting.
Now, for those who do not know your history, I believe it was 38, 39 that the Nazis started out. They started off as brown shirts. They do the same. They want to call us Nazis. Well, they are real Nazis, except they're black shirts. The brown shirts of the real Nazi party used to do the same thing. They would go around, intimidate, harass everybody. Now we're talking Adolf Hitler Nazi. That is them.
Me hit me. Luckily, I had a helmet on. So essentially, with piecing together with journalists,
and they also,
by the way, are not all,
they're also burning books like the real Nazis did. They're burning flags like the Nazis did. So they have Nazi written all over them. They're the real fascists.
Conservative or Republican, these are even left-wing people. We figured out that they set up, by realizing I was there by the second night, they set up a fake film crew to look like a documentary film crew in order to hunt me down and to pick me out in order to avoid police detection so that they could assault me, threaten my life to kill me, and turn an entire crowd on me that became so immediately violent that the police saw this, that even a somewhat left-wing journalist said, I saw as the crowd turned against you and the violence escalated. That's actually what caused the police to turn in on the crowd, because they saw basically that the whole mob had energized to essentially try to take your life, which being yours would be my life.
Well, we have them on videotape. I don't know how many we can identify, but the police are looking for these people, and you will press charges, will you not, if they find them?
Yeah, I mean, they threatened my life. They physically assaulted me. They said they wanted to take my life. They made serious physical charges. They tried to pull me into the crowd. They made serious, deadly accusations of mob mentality, claiming that I had used slurs like the N-word towards black individuals, saying that I was a known racist. I mean, these are slanderous, defamatory remarks that in these situations are actually deadly, and they're not to be taken lightly. Like calling fire in a movie theater, there's a point where speech becomes dangerous to people in terms of their safety. And I know that's a very sketchy and somewhat scary topic to talk about. But when there's hundreds of people who are out for blood, and someone says that you are the person who's causing all of the problems, and that they lie and say you're out there to put people in jail, to get people killed by police, they not only jeopardize myself, but they put the safety and the security of all press and all citizens who value their First Amendment completely in jeopardy. And they actually, in some ways, compromise what the Constitution and the First Amendment was even designed for.
I know you're young. You think you're invincible. You have a lot to prove. You think you have, there's a million reasons, and I've done and given all of those reasons in my life. What you do is extremely important, but I beg of you, please, don't do anything foolish. If I know you're close to the Spirit, pray all throughout. Please warn me if I need to turn around, and then obey that. Please obey that. What you do is really important, and I ask that you would come home and stay home. Your wife, and I'm about to call her too. Your wife wants you to stay home. Please don't do anything stupid, and just follow the Lord. Will you do that?
I really appreciate. I actually will, and I'll say this, that even though I'm sure some of your listeners are not religious, even when I was leaving Rochester and I felt God tell me to go, not to go back out, I asked where to go next, and I can't tell you where I am right now, but I can tell you that last night, at random, I happened to be in the vicinity of Lancaster, which is probably pretty bizarre for most people in the media to be near Lancaster. And that happened to be at the exact time that even Forbes wrote an article and said that the coverage of the riots last night, myself and another individual, because no media was present, may actually turn the tides in Pennsylvania to get Trump elected, because of showcasing the lack of law and order that comes when Democrats are in charge, when people are unable to act. And the way that Biden isn't responding, the way he's not addressing this, the way that he's not condemning this, may actually turn Pennsylvania completely red. And I think that, I think the work is spiritual, and that we have a fight ahead of us.
We are fighting. We're fighting evil, and I understand that. And I don't have a right to tell you what to do. You don't work for me. But I worry about you. We pray for you. I ask the audience, please pray for Elijah and all those who are with him and doing like work. But please, I'm glad to hear that you are being led by the Spirit on where to go, because if we indeed are fighting darkness, as long as you are light, he will direct you where you're supposed to be.
That is true. Any real journalist, and I'm not talking mainstream media, because they're all phonies anyway, at least 99.9% of them are fake. And they don't denounce these people. They pretty much support these people. But for those real people, like on the Blaze and Elijah there, please be careful. As Glenn did say, you got a dangerous job, and you're just trying to do what you're getting paid to do. You do what you like to do, but it's not worth risking getting hurt in any way, because it can get out of control really fast. So all y'all be careful, okay? No, Glenn does not talk like that no more. It's kind of like the restrictions are taken off from him. Even Hannity talks different on his radio show, if you ever heard him. He is more passionate. He is more fired up than he is on Fox. I wish I had all of this, because it's a lot of subjects he talks about anyway is very important. But Barr today, I forgot where he was, but this is from The Hill. I did a conference.
The rule of law is the foundation of civilization, including economic prosperity. And that's why these so-called Black Lives Matter people, now that as a proposition, who can quarrel with the proposition Black Lives Matter? But they're not interested in Black lives. They're interested in props. A small number of blacks who were killed by police during conflict with police, usually less than a dozen a year, who they can use as props to achieve a much broader political agenda. But I view the question of Black lives as not only keeping people alive, but also having prosperity and flourishing in their communities.
I don't think he is just sitting back and doing nothing. I'm sure he's up to something. This is what's great about this administration, is because they're doing all kinds of things behind the scenes, and it looks like they're only focused on one thing. That's what's great. I really wish I was able to see it because I did not find it anywhere. When it comes to okay, what do I got? Okay. Well, on to the next one, but before I go on to the Rona, yeah, it's the Rona again. Really, just be vigilant. I have spotted Black Lives Matter signs around here. Not too worried about it, but in other cities, they're more organized, if you will, together. So nobody's done anything around here, so very lucky. So just be careful, and justice is coming. Have faith in the president, have faith in Barr. The job will get done. And if what I hear from a YouTuber, it's going to be interesting, very interesting, very soon. Today, breaking news was that Nashville was caught cheating. They were fixing the numbers and not telling anybody about the Rona. Somebody said that, and I really liked the name of that. It had a nice sound to it, you know. Let's see if she's going to play.
There's a massive COVID reporting scandal
Oh, I knew it wasn't going to do it. I knew it. Let's try it again.
This is breaking news. A massive COVID reporting scandal uncovered in Nashville, Tennessee. Our guest today, John Rich.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow
This is
Live.
a really
On June
good show.
30th, contact tracing was giving a small view of coronavirus clusters. Construction and nursing homes causing problems. More than 1,000 cases traced to each category. At bars and restaurants, a total of just 22 cases. Leslie Waller from the health department asked, quote, "This isn't going to be publicly released, right? Just info for mayor's office?" Correct. Not for public consumption, answers the mayor's senior advisor, Benjamin Eagles.
Phone lines are open for your questions right now. Call 1-800-684-3110.
We raised taxes 34%, and we put literally hundreds and thousands of people out of work that are now worried about losing their homes, their apartments, etc. And we did it off of false information and bogus data. That should be illegal.
And now your host, Logan Sekulow.
Welcome to the one and only flag-waving, God-praising, trail-blazing, heck-raising radio show takeover of Jay Sekulow Live. Today we are being joined in just a few segments by my buddy John Rich. You know him from Big and Rich. You know him as a Nashville icon, the owner of a bar affected greatly by the COVID-19 shutdown and lockdowns. That's obviously the Redneck Riviera Bar and Grill downtown Nashville on Broadway. We're going to have him because I think he's got some words to say about what's happening in Nashville. If you don't know, late last night, and obviously we're in the Nashville area. Will and I are based there. It's big news amongst us, but I think you all need to know nationwide, this is probably what's happening. You know, it's definitely a potential, Will, for to have this uncovered everywhere across the country, as the numbers have not been reported accurately. And what we saw was leaked emails that came out of the mayor's office and to the mayor's office, really specifically saying, don't let the public know that the spread and the outbreak was amongst nursing homes and construction sites. It wasn't amongst Broadway, downtown Nashville, the bars and restaurants. And this has been a pretty shocking revelation, as we have seen the city decimated in terms of issues, whether you go back early this year with tornadoes, then there was the lockdown, and then our lovely mayor of Nashville, Tennessee, requested a 34% tax increase on property taxes.
Right, yeah.
It's been a rough time. And look, restaurants recently and bars just went up to, in Nashville, as of a couple weeks ago, went up to, they can have 10 people inside. Then it was, you can have 25 people. And now, guess what? Just a few minutes ago, after they were caught red-handed by essentially not reporting the data. I mean, in the emails, Will, it says on there, this isn't going to go public, right? This is internal.
That's right. Leslie Waller from the health department specifically asked the mayor's office representative, this isn't going to be publicly released, right? Just for mayor's office. And Benjamin Eagles, who is the senior advisor to Mayor Cooper, said, correct, not for public consumption. And what that revealed was that when they were doing the contact tracing and seeing that thousands of cases were seen to have come out of both nursing homes, which has been the case. It was the case in New York. It was the case in a lot of places, because in a lot of places the right attention wasn't given to that, but also construction sites.
Yep.
And
which is the common places we've
Right.
seen this spread. We saw that in New York, nursing homes, construction sites. And look, we're not downplaying the virus here. I want to make sure you know that we very much take this seriously.
Right. But at that point, when this email went, there were just 22 cases attributed to bars and restaurants. So not just focusing on the bar angle, but the entire hospitality bar and restaurant industry. Only 22 of the thousands of restaurants potentially in the city.
Yeah. Unbelievable. This is the kind of corruption that may be happening in your hometown too. Look, and we at the ACLJ, there's some stuff that we can do, and we're working on that right now. We've already put some people in place to start looking into some of the legal responses to all of this. Give us a call. I want to know what you think. 1-800-684-3110. 1-800-684-3110. A couple segments.
So that's what's happening in Nashville, as much as it's happening around all the country, with Michigan, New York, California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. Those people need to give AG Barr the data they've been told to do it about nursing homes. That is still, there's still no word about it, but Cuomo is saying, well, I can't do it until after the election. It's going to take us a while. No, he's stalling. Now they must probably, at least I'm guessing, have to go after Nashville, because you're talking about people's lives. And I'm going to, hold on a second. I want to check out what this is real quick, but I can't. Oh, that one's next. Be right with you. Is this important? What you got, Side? Oh, I see. I see. Okay. I gotcha. But when you have Cuomo like this, yeah, In fact, how can I say this discreetly? There's a person who has told me their relative has died in a nursing home. I'm trying to be compassionate and about it as much as I can, and it's heartbreaking. And these people, all of them, who have loved ones, friends who have died from this, can't go to a funeral because you can only have 10, 15 people there. That's not right. And they know, these governors know it's not right. This is your final respects. Even for somebody who just passed away from anything, you're still not able to do this under current situations. Now, last week, Governor Whitmer was taken to the state Supreme Court because of the 1945 law, which that's wrong. She should not be going by that because that gives her undiscretional power to continuously write executive orders to keep us locked down. So they're going to try to get rid of this law. What I read from one of the justices is it's possible, only possible, I'm not going to say definite, it could go away. And that could mean a big relief for the state of Michigan. So we're all just going to have to sit tight until the justices make up their real decision. I'm guessing. I won't ever say anything positive without knowing. And I'm always willing to correct myself if I am either misread or whatever the case may be. Now, I've heard that this has been taken off Facebook, so this is going to be interesting how it plays. I hear they're really banning this video.
Li Mengyan is the virologist who says she has evidence about where this pandemic actually came from. We're happy to have her on tonight. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on.
Hi, Tucker. Hi, Tucker. Thank you.
Thank you. I know that you've published some of your research. You're planning on publishing more soon. Give us, for a non-scientific audience, a summary of why you believe this virus came from a lab in Wuhan, please.
Okay, briefly, from my first report, I can present the solid scientific evidence to our audience that this virus, COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, actually is not from nature. It is a man-made virus created in the lab based on the China military discovered and owned.
The recall actually starts in October, I was told. But, when we have a recall, you could always get somebody worse. We already have a damn Secretary of State who allegedly misspelled the president's name on the ballots for the military. We got a really bad apples in our governorship.
The very unique bad coronavirus, which cannot affect people, but after the modification, becomes a very harmful virus at now. So I have evidence to show why they can do it, what they have done, how did they do it.
So what you're saying is much more sinister even than we've suggested on this show, than Tom Cotton, so that almost anyone suggested. You're saying that the Chinese government manufactured this virus, if I'm hearing you correctly. That's what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Based on the virus genome, it's basically like our fingerprint. So you can see the very unusual characters in their genome, which clearly, based on the other evidence they left during the modification, we can say finally this is exactly the one come from their own special bad coronavirus and then target human.
what you're alleging is shocking more even than I anticipated when we invited you on. So I just want to ask the most obvious question, which is this genome presumably is in the possession of many researchers around the world. Why is nobody saying this if it's true?
Yeah, why there is nobody want to say it? It's because of the big suppression come from the Chinese Communist Party government and also their friend in scientific world. So basically, this is very clearly that this virus is like Frankenstein. So he created those things like basically a cow has deer's head, has rabbit's ear, and also have monkey's hand. So they can never get it from the nature. And there were evidence left in the genome. But the scientific world also keeps silence, work together with Chinese Communist Party. They don't want people to know this truth. Also, that's why I get suspended, I get suppression, I am the target that Chinese Communist Party won't be disappeared.
You're a brave person.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt and assuming you're not an anti-Chinese racist. So it's not clear why Twitter would shut you down or why you're being ignored by the rest of the U.S. media. Let me ask you a couple of questions. Why would the Chinese government intentionally create a virus like this?
Okay, if you want to know the exact motive, the exact idea, I think people have to come to ask them, ask Communist Party, why did they do it? Because they are the one do it. We cannot always understand their evil thinking. You have to come to ask them. But what we see already proves that they have done that. It harmed everyone in the world, lead to the historic pandemic, involve everyone.
How do you believe this virus made its way from the lab in Wuhan outside to the rest of the world?
Okay, first, as I said, I have this kind of solid scientific evidence, and also my next report will come out soon to make you fully understand it. The other thing is I work in the WHO reference lab, which is the top coronavirus lab in the world in the University of Hong Kong. And since I get deeply into such investigation in secret from the early beginning of this outbreak, I had my intelligence because I also get my own unique network in China, involve the hospital, institute, and also government. Also, I work with the top coronavirologists in the world. So together with my experience, I can tell you, this is created in the lab. This is from that template owned by China military. And also it is spread to the world to make such damage.
To make such damage, do you believe the Chinese government released this intentionally, on purpose? Did they do this?
Yes, of course, it's intentionally. And even no need more evidence, you already can see what they try to cover up from the early beginning, as I reviewed in different medias before, and also what else they have done, like making the fabricated virus to throw out the natural origin theory, censorship, every evidence point to the lab origins, and also clearly try to make people like me want to talk about the truth get disappeared.
You know, it's hard to be shocked in a moment like this, but you have succeeded in shocking me. Unfortunately, this is not the forum for the details of your research. I don't have the grounding necessary to ask you the right questions. This is when you wish for a functioning media, because what you just said completely changes everything we think we know about the pandemic that's wrecking our country. So I really hope sincerely that you will be doing many interviews in American media and explaining this in much greater detail. And I hope you'll come back here. Doctor, thank you so much.
Thank you. Everyone needs to know the truth.
I think that is tremendously brave, especially because when this thing started, there was another doctor who wanted to expose the truth. So mysteriously, guess what? He died. So let's, you got to keep praying for all these people who have the courage to come out, especially against China. I mean, they could be anywhere. And that's not a joke, because we have spies here. We have all kinds of things. They could disappear in maybe Hong Kong. I don't know where this young lady is, but I hope she stays safe. Keep getting the word out. Don't let them censor you, and get that paperwork out. That is true, Breadmaker. Absolutely. Because again, they don't care. They will kill people to suppress the truth. Now, I've heard, and from the Speakeasy and Promises Cat, Phil D'Angelo has a theory, and I think it's a pretty good one. Could have been to calm down the riots or protests, if you will, in Hong Kong. That's a pretty good theory, really. But who knows? Only they know why they did it. Tom Cotton was the first one who came out and called China out. The only one I've ever heard for a long time. Then people are starting to slowly getting the word out. I'm going to take a couple minute break for these couple commercials.
Been under
No, that's not it. Why is that working? Okay. Never mind. It's not working. So I'll have to work on that. My apologies to Boogie and Neil. I'll fix it. It's always good. It's not hard. Amongst Constitution Day, the president had a few remarks at the White House. And here is the president and vice president. And of course, there's no sound. Love it. I love when a plan comes through. Let me fix it. Good Lord. Can't YouTube ever do anything right? I swear. Let me try to find you a good one. Let me see if it'll refresh. Nope. Vice President goes to Washington and loses his voice. So, this is what I'm going to put out. You had a White House conference. What the hell? Huh. Alright, I'm going to go over here first then. That should be working. Okay.
Hey, everybody.
Okay. That'll work. Okay, let me work on that while you work. Yeah, paying Google, exactly. Oh. Technicalities, guys. Technicalities. Where'd it go? No way. Screwed up my whole deal. This is not good, but it's okay. It's okay. Let me see. Still workable.
Help you.
Okay. Let's see if this will work. Thank you for your patience.
Perfect union when in the course of human events.
Welcome to this Hillsdale College online course called Constitution 101. By Constitution, we of course mean the greatest and longest living of all the constitutions in history, the Constitution of the United States. We study that here because we're mindful of the fact, and always have been at Hillsdale, that we are citizens and we need our freedom in order to live well and do our work, especially the work of a college, which radically depends upon freedom of every kind. We teach the Constitution to every student here at the college, and now we're going to help you learn something about it. The other people who are teaching in this are members of our politics faculty. I'm a member of that faculty myself. And among them all, they may have the most knowledge of the meaning of the Constitution and the significance of the changes that have gone on around it. And so it should be a privilege for you to watch this, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you
Hey, Aaron, John.
read
Hey,
and
Steph.
continue
What's up,
learning
man?
about this for as long as you live, and teach others too. So much I'll explain depends on that. There are a lot of details in this course. Details of how exactly things work and why they work.
Is it?
Details of different understandings than the one that prevails here
I
about
started
those
to
things.
take it.
And so that will involve us in some complications. And it'll be helpful, I think, if we can keep the kind of general points in mind. And I'm going to name some of those today in my lecture. My first question I'll ask myself and you is, what kind of thing are the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution? Turns out the answer to that is very enriching. They're different documents. There's an argument that they're opposed. There's a powerful argument in the historical scholarship that the Declaration was meant to be a radical document and the Constitution was meant to be conservative. And those people argue that the Declaration is about the rights of us all, and the Constitution is really about protecting the privileged. Well, we think that's nonsense around here, and even on its face, it's nonsense. For one reason, at the time, exact time, the Declaration of Independence is from 1776, and the Constitution is from 1787, so they're close together. But never mind, there were all kinds of state constitutions written at the same time as the Declaration of Independence. Some of them signed by people who also signed the Declaration of Independence, and they're all like the Constitution of the United States in their structure, which I'm going to talk about some. That's important. So another thing about it is that
It's really important for everybody to learn this, and I'm guilty. I don't know it. I should learn it, just like everybody else.
strikes me as particularly silly, I've written a book about this, is if you read the Declaration of Independence, you will find that it comes in three parts. And in the first part, it states some universal principles, very beautiful. And in the second part, it contains a bill of particulars in 17 paragraphs about bad stuff the King of England did, which bad stuff justifies the making of America, throwing off the old government and adopting a new one. And those things are remarkably like the Constitution of the United States. What did the king do wrong? Well, he interfered with the legislature, which is a violation of the first step in all government, the making of laws, but also a violation of separation of powers, which is crucial to how the Constitution of the United States worked. So separation of powers is important. And then he interfered with the people's ability to elect legislators. In other words, representation, a key feature of the Constitution of the United States. And then he interfered with the judges. He would ship people, arrest them for crimes and ship them off to England where they couldn't be tried by a jury of their peers, nor before judges who were independent of the executive branch, which more or less the king was. So you see, they're writing the Constitution right there. If you have a government that does these things, then you are justified to rebel against that government and to kill anybody who resists you. So it implies the Constitution. Now, what kind of thing that they are different, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, they serve different functions. They also sound different in a very interesting way. The Declaration of Independence is really beautiful. when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands that have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. Isn't that a grand expression, the laws of nature and of nature's God? It's written like that. Also, it's not time-bound. When in the course of human events, that means any time in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people, that means any people, anywhere, anytime. The claim is, what's going to follow in this document is right at all times. And so one way to think about the difference between the Declaration and the Constitution is it's a document about ultimate purposes, what they call in classic philosophy final causes. Final causes are the things that we seek above all others, the things we would die for. And so the Declaration of Independence states those, and of course those words echo around the world still today, even when they're distorted. You're going to learn something about that in this course. Well, the Constitution is not quite like that. The Constitution is, it provides a form of government. And when you read it, I regard it as beautiful and think I understand why it's beautiful. It has to do with its structure, which Madison says is the most important thing about it. But,
True.
On any given passage, right, it's full of details. Like there's a list in Article 1, Section 8, things the Congress can do. Well, post offices and post roads is among them. It's hard to write a beautiful sentence about that. No, this is a document about how the government is going to work, even how it's going to look. It looks like a thing that operates in three branches. If there's interviews going on in front of the White House, which there are every day on the nightly news, there's a picture of the White House in the background because that's where the president works and that's where executive things are done. And if there's something big in the Congress, then there's cameras looking up at the Capitol Dome because that's where the Congress operates and where the legislation is made. And the same for the Supreme Court building. In operation, the government looks like the Constitution. And sure enough, the first three articles in the Constitution, the first one sets up the legislative branch, beginning with the words, all legislative power herein granted. And one thing you're going to learn in this course is that we don't make our laws through the Congress anymore. That's why there can be so many of them. And that's why it's impossible to hold to account those who make them, except very indirectly. Indeed, it's even hard to find out who makes them. I think there are 150 lawmaking agencies in the federal government now.
Wow.
So each of those clauses establish 1, 2, 3, the way the government of the United States looks. And so if you think about it, you couldn't have any serious activity that did not have a final cause. A whole bunch of people cooperating, sometimes at risk to their lives, suffering and trouble and sacrifice. That started right at the beginning, because the first thing that happened after the Declaration of Independence was actually it already happened a bit before. We're having a war with England, the greatest power on earth. And to undertake that, you need a big reason. You need some ultimate reason. And any time people think of their deaths, they always think of what they lived their lives for. That's what the Declaration of Independence is. But then on the other hand, if you're actually going to have a great government, then there's going to have to be ways for it to operate. Because think what it has to achieve. It has to grant power. The doctrine of the Declaration of Independence is that all legitimate power stems from those who are governed, no other source. But then somehow you've got to get some way to get legitimacy into the things that the government does and have that operate on a routine basis. So if you're going to have a legitimate government, you're going to have a form, a recognized way by which it operates. And so the Constitution provides that. One, you could say, is the final cause, and the other is the formal cause. Now I'm going to back up a step and ask a question that's prevalent today, and that is, why should you have any government at all? What do you need it for? And then we were just over in England as we're making this course, and we were celebrating the completion of the official biography of Winston Churchill, and there was a couple of young English guys who were working and helping us get around, and they were delightful people, and I got into long talks with them, and they just made the point. Because, they're having the big debate about whether they separate from the European Union over there or not, and the young, as a rule, don't favor the separation. And they said, well, we're not English. We're European. And I said, what if you don't like something the European Union does? Oh, there's a lot we don't like. We want to see it reformed. And I said, good. What means do you have to achieve that reform? Because it's kind of difficult, isn't it? There's 29 countries, I think, aren't they? They don't all speak the same language. How would you have a conversation with a wide body of fellow citizens to establish a thing like major reforms to the government? And that's a point, isn't it? Because in the Constitution, well, in the Federalist Papers, which are assigned to read along with this course, and I urge you to read them and reread them because they're a great achievement in political thought, one of the greatest, and one of the greatest American such achievements. And in the 51st Federalist, Madison is explaining why you have to build a constitution that has precautions in it. It has to grant power. You have to have that. But also it has to constrain power. You have to have that. And the way he puts the point is, what is government but the profoundest of all reflections on human nature? If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither internal nor external controls on the government would be needed. See what that means? He's locating us in the hierarchy of nature. Down at the bottom are the beast, or the rocks. And up at the top are angels and God. And if angels were being governed, although there's a record in the Bible that their behavior is not perfect, still it's true that as a common run, it's probably a lot better than ours. And they don't, they're imagined as disembodied intellects, and so they don't have all the needs and pressures we have. And the beast, they just always obey instinct. Whereas we're moral beings, which means we're called to do right, and we don't always. And that is actually the reason why we need laws. But Madison just makes the common sense points. The people who make the laws are people too. How do we know they won't make them in their own interest? Well, you need a constitution, and it needs to be in control of the governed. And so the reason nations, and that word nation, it comes from the Latin word natura, which means nature. And that means that the making of laws is written in human nature, and it actually proceeds, Aristotle says, from our ability to talk. Because that's the pregnant thing about us. That's the big thing about us. And so this need for government is fundamental. And on the other hand, we need to be able to control it. And nations, therefore, are conceived as natural things where people can understand each other. They share a common final cause, as in the Declaration of Independence, which tells us what our nation is for. And then they can cooperate with each other to appoint and manage a government that responds to their will. So it's actually true then, isn't it, that in this age where we're eschewing nationalism for internationalism, the Declaration of Independence talks about that. And mark the point, I've already made it. The Declaration of Independence begins universally. It says that everybody has rights. Every human being, the same in every age, no matter where. And then it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. In other words, these universal rights that we have, they call for government to protect those rights and they call for a kind of government that will be responsive to us. It's a remarkable thing, I think. It's hard to quarrel with the assertion, which I make all the time, that the greatest of the modern countries is the United States of America. Well, its story is tremendous, right? Because it begins with a new world. Nobody knew where it was. Nobody knew what it was. Until about 1806, I think it was. Nobody really knew how big it was. Nobody had gone across the New World and all the way back until about then, Lewis and Clark. So something happened on this new land. And what was it? They picked up a civilization. It's like in the Western movies, there's often a contest between somebody who's got a law book and somebody who's got a gun. And in the towns where the Westerns take place, there's no capacity at all to produce either a law book or a gun. But they know about them because they've come from a well-developed civilization and brought it out to the frontier. That's what the whole Western movies are, just recreations of American history. Because the civilization mostly of Europe, with its understanding of God and its understanding of right and its learning and its understanding of nature, that comes over here, and those people brought all that in their minds and hearts. What they didn't bring was aristocracy. They didn't bring an established elite to run everything. What they brought instead was ideas of freedom and equality. And so there was this new world, and a bunch of people got to take it over. And they had, because, the first settlements are about 150 years before the Declaration of Independence. And that 150 years was a time of great learning. One of the most remarkable things that was learned was that most of the early settlers came because of religious persecution. And they thought the solution to that was to set up communities where their religion was installed by law and protected, and everybody had to practice it. And they thought, it's a big old country. If somebody doesn't like it, they can go somewhere else. So religious conformity was more or less the rule. Early on, though, the idea came to be, we don't really have to fight about that. Because first of all, we do fight a lot about it. They used to, in Massachusetts Bay Colony, they used to hang Quakers for coming to town to try to convert people to Quakerism. And Quakers are Christians, different brand. And so they thought that through, and in the course of that 150 years, they adopted the idea of civil and religious freedom. And that's in the Declaration of Independence, right? Because life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that has to do, including with our duty to God. And so that religion should be respected, but also free, that reaches its perfection in the Declaration of Independence. God, I should say, occurs 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. And it's an interesting thing because it demonstrates the way they talk of him, how important God is, and it demonstrates also how important limited government is, because God appears first as the maker of the laws of nature, and nature's God, the legislator. Then he appears as the supreme judge of the world, the judge, and then he appears as divine providence, the executive branch, and then he appears up higher up as the creator, the founder of all things, right? And the lesson of the Declaration of Independence is, 1, God is a standard, greatly to be respected and worshipped and understood. But 2, you wouldn't combine all those powers in the hand of any being except God, not for men. So you see, this tremendous opportunity, which I can't see myself how it would ever be repeated in history, because there isn't a new world anymore, maybe space. But there's nowhere to go like that anymore. And so they went there and they got 150 years to work on it. And then they proclaimed a regime defined by these two documents. That's one of the most important events in human history, in my opinion. I'll say a thing or two about the Constitution, because that's important. First of all, I mentioned that it's divided into groups, and there are 7 articles in the Constitution of the United States. And the first 3 set up the 3 branches of government. But then a second thing about it's interesting, and that is that it's not an unlimited government. There's something called the police power, which comes from English common law, very old. And it's the general authority to legislate for the health, safety, and welfare of the people. State governments in America have that. And that means that if a state government tries to do something, there are provisions in state constitutions and in the federal constitution that forbid them to do many things. But the presumption is they have the power to do it if it fits within that common law definition, which is very wide. Whereas the Constitution of the United States delegates certain powers to the federal government. And just think what a different thing in kind that is. Like, Hillsdale College has articles of incorporation, and they're very beautiful, by the way, and we follow them here closely. But when it comes to the operation of the colleges, it basically grants us, the board and me and the staff here, power to do anything a college needs to do. Well, the federal government's not like that. The federal government has Article 1, Section 8, and that's a limit on the government, you see. The clauses it's not hard to state what they're about. Is about national defense, the big job of the federal government. The second biggest group is provisions to guarantee a system of national commerce all over the nation. One nation as regards economics. Contracts are to be respected. Bankruptcies, there's to be a provision for them so that you have to be a legal process before you can get out of your debts, but there should be such a process. Money, weights and measures. It's going to be a great nation, trading freely inside its borders. And that will make the nation strong, and nations need to be strong in order to defend themselves. And the only other things that are powers given to the federal government are basically to operate in the states on the ground where the federal government has installations. So the post office is federal territory. And the federal building, there are way too many of those now, but there's a provision for them right from the beginning. So it's a limited government, and whatever it does, it has to justify by a specific provision in the Constitution that permits it. And that's not the strictest rule in the world. There's leeway. But it's a different kind of thing than to begin on the basis you can do whatever you please. The last thing I'll say about the Constitution is what's it trying to do? We like to say today, if we're conservative-minded people, which I happen to be, that the Constitution is to limit the government. But of course, that's obviously not true. The first thing it does is empower the government. And it's all over the Constitution and the documents surrounding it that everybody understood they need a strong government. In fact, the Constitution itself, which replaced the Articles of Confederation, was written in part because the Articles were failing. And the reason they were failing was the government wasn't strong enough to protect our rights. There were foreign troops on our soil and we couldn't do anything about it. Couldn't pay our debts. There were riots in the states and they couldn't be put down. Madison writes all this up in a really great essay before the Constitutional Convention called Vices of the Political System of the United States. It's in our Constitution reader. And so they need a stronger government, but they divide it. Now, what is the purpose of the division? And you have to think about how profound the division is, although it's been much overcome by the growth of the administrative state and the bureaucracy, which you're going to hear a lot about in this course. It's still true that it's a tremendous achievement, because in dividing the powers, they arranged for different methods of election of the different parts. So the president serves for 4 years. The House of Representatives serves for 2. The Senate serves for 6. The judges are appointed by the president on advice of the Senate. The constituencies are different. The constituency for a senator is a state. The constituency for the president is an electoral college made up of which you win by majority, that's under pressure these days, which you win by majority of the electors in the states, and the electors are calculated according to the number of senators and representatives each state has. So you see what it does? It spreads authority across space. And you remember, this is the greatest and most extensive republic in human history. And they were trying to unite a continent, the full size of which they did not quite know yet. Although George Washington did name his army the Continental Army. So they want it spread, and so the Senate spreads political authority, and that means people who live in the very different and widely separated parts of the country all get a say, even if they're not very numerous. And then, on the other hand, it spreads authority across time. Because if you want to change something in the American government, the fastest you can possibly turn the whole government over is 6 years. Because it takes 3 elections to elect a whole Senate, and the president 2/3 of that amount of time. So that means that it places a premium on opinions that we hold firmly and for a long time. And Madison makes this point beautifully in the Federalist Papers, and more than once. In the 49th, I think it is, he says, it is our reason alone that must be placed in control of the government. Our passions must be controlled by it. So we're supposed to think before we act. Here's another feature of the Constitution. In the 63rd Federalist, Madison says that this is the first purely representative government in history. He's claiming a uniqueness. And what does he mean by purely representative? He means that the sovereign in England was the king, and he was the executive branch. The sovereign in Athens was the free citizens, and they were the legislative branch. The sovereign in America is the constitutional majority, but they don't occupy a branch of government. We don't control, they've introduced the referendum, things like that in later years, but there's no federal referendum process. Why? Madison thought it would be good for us, because, just like you can't trust the government fully because they're people, you can't trust us fully either, because we're people too. And so we can only act through elections. That makes elections important in America. And it also means we can't do anything by the spur of the moment. The best decision's not being made on the spur of the moment. And I'll state a telling exception to that too. The president is specifically empowered to act alone. And that's in matters of execution. Think of the different meanings of that term, execution. When you've got a war, you have to act suddenly. But laws prevail because, of course, if the president starts a war and the Congress doesn't like it, or if he sends a bunch of troops somewhere, they don't have to supply any money for that. And the money will run out if they will put a stop to it. And they have, often in American history, and threatened other times. So you see, the idea is that we have all the power, but we can't act except through our representatives. And that adds patience and deliberation to the process. And then a last thing, the size of the United States, the fact that it's spread so far, the fact that it includes so many people in so many jurisdictions. The states are supposed to have a lot more authority than they have these days, and one of my wishes is to see it restored. A lot of other things like that too. But when it's spread all over the place, let's say you've got 10 little conspiratorial friends. You know, if you got 10 little conspiratorial friends, you can meet in dark rooms and whisper to each other and nobody need find out. But what's 10 going to do in a country this size? In fact, to influence the country, you have to talk across millions of people, hundreds of thousands in the founding, millions now, tens of millions now, and you have to speak across vast spaces. And Madison writes, that will teach us to be more candid with each other. We love to say that all politicians are liars, and I think that's not quite true, but it's a rough truth. But on the other hand, think how much worse it would be if they didn't have to talk in front of us, and if they weren't free to contradict each other. And I want to close with this point because it's fundamentally important. There are just two ways of governing human beings. And one is by talking and the other is by force. Because we are the speaking beings. This rationality that we have that lets us use common nouns, that's what makes us political. And so legitimate political systems are always built on talking, not on violence. They may take violence to install. They may require violence to persist and to defend, but they must not proceed in their ordinary workings by violence of one citizen upon another. And so we have a political system that, first of all, is meant to protect our rights, which are written in our nature, the decisive part of which is our ability to reason and talk. But also we have a nation where we're supposed to discuss things and teach each other and learn from each other.
Very true.
And I'll go back to the European Union. The Poles and the Czechs and the English and the French don't really have a good way to talk to each other except through the agencies of the European Union. And that means it's very difficult for there to be a culture in which public opinion is formed freely among all of the people who are affected. They can't speak with each other routinely. There are translation programs, and lots of people speak more than one language in Europe, and yet to talk in your native tongue, the tongue in which you've been educated and by which you articulate your best thoughts, that's what you do, especially with fellow citizens. It's become a very great country in the course of its history. Beyond the imaginings, even, of the people who founded it, who were extremely ambitious people. They had the highest possible hopes. Right? Well, if that's true, there must have been some cause of it. But also, it's in that final purpose we serve, that we have adopted. It's a purpose available to all human beings. We have adopted it for our own. And then finally, in this form of government we have under the Constitution, which is itself a reflection of human nature, and that is why it has worked so well. So I'll close with the editorial point, well known. I think we ought to restore the authority of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.
Very true.
Thank you.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, when in the course of human events,
Hi, I'm Dr. Thomas West, Hillsdale College. I teach in the politics department. I'm a professor of politics. And my talk today is going to be on natural rights in the American Revolution. And the topic is a good one because it indicates two things. One is a theory, a theoretical concept, natural rights. And the other is a historical event rooted in a time and place, the American Revolution. So in order to understand our founding, it's important, I think, to grasp the connection between theory and practice, between the ideas that motivated or that helped the founders to structure their activities and actions against Britain, and at the same time to understand what the practical fight was all about with the British that led to American independence. In the period leading up to the Revolution and independence in 1776, people in the colonies had been pretty much left alone by the British, with some exceptions. There was a long period in which there was a kind of uneasy truce, you might say, between the colonial legislatures elected by the colonists and the royal governors sent over from the king and from Britain. And there was a rivalry there. The colonial legislatures tended to get their way, much to the chagrin often of the British officials. And that was an arrangement that lasted for quite a while. But then there was the French and Indian War, which changed everything. That war concluded in 1763 with a treaty of peace that then led both sides, both the British and the Americans, to think very differently about their relationship with each other. From the British side, they became increasingly impatient with the colonists now that there was no longer the French threat on the northern border to worry about. They needed the colonists to fight the French, which had been a theme throughout the 18th century, but now the French were defeated. They're gone as a serious power in North America, and it's up to, then it became the British Empire. But that meant that the British government didn't have to treat the colonists so politely. And they also pointed out, you, the colonists, we've been defending you all this time, and you haven't been paying taxes, or at least not very many taxes. So we're going to do something about that. We're going to start taxing you, and we're also going to start making it clear to you that you're part of the empire and you have to obey us. On the colonial side, of course, the Americans' attitude was, now that the French threat is gone, we don't need the British as much. So all that time when the British were saying, you need us, and the colonists did need the British forces to, with respect to the French. Now it was, let's go off on our own, and at least let's not be pressed and pushed around by the British. There was not an immediate desire for independence in 1763, but the attitude of the Americans was, let's not let the British push us around anymore. Let's stick to our own way of doing things and make the British acknowledge that. That led to the crisis that started in the 1760s, 70s, leading up to the actual Declaration of Independence in 1776. What the colonists were doing throughout this period is not just reacting in a visceral way to their desire to be free, but they also had at their ready at hand, a doctrine of natural rights and natural law, which had been around the colonies for quite a while. These ideas had come into the colonies sometime around 1710 or shortly thereafter, became widely known and discussed in the colonies throughout that period between 1710 and the end of the French and Indian War, 50 years later. And the Americans, therefore, were able to say, look, it's not just a matter of our wish to not be dominated by you people, you British. It's also, we have a right to be free. We have a right to self-government. And the British, of course, in response said, no, you don't. You're part of the empire. You have to obey the parliament. And that's the story. That's the end of it. We might compromise. We might let you have a little freedom. But that was the gist of what happened. So what the appeal to the natural rights doctrine, which began in earnest in the 1760s, was an appeal to a doctrine that claims to be universally true for all human beings everywhere. And that's what gave the revolution its peculiar flavor of not just being a local quarrel between this and that group, but a quarrel that was made in the name of universal principles of natural law and natural rights, of something that is true now and forever, and will always be true about human relationships. That teaching of the natural law is stated all over the place in founding era documents. You could find in the Declaration of Independence, most famously. You see it in state after state. Each state, the states that put together constitutions, most of them had bills of rights, had statements of principle. These doctrines were widely held. You hear occasionally some people will say, well, that was just Jefferson's idea and he was influenced by the French. That's ridiculous. These ideas had been around the colonies for 60 years by that time and widely accepted and known, and became officially part of the record in the Revolution. And what you find in these state constitutions is various restatements of the same ideas that are in the Declaration of Independence, and they help to clarify. So in the Declaration, you have all men are created equal. And that has led lots of people to make all kinds of assumptions about men and women, about blacks and whites, about and so on. It's not about human equality in the sense of we're all the same. It's about human equality in the sense of no one has the right to dominate anybody else without their consent.
Wow, I didn't know that.
The founders had a way of different formulations of this. For example, Virginia, all men are by nature equally free and independent. Or Massachusetts, all men are born free and equal. These were different versions of the same thought, that no one has the right to rule another, that there is and then that was also put in moral language in terms of rights and natural law. So the natural right idea arises from the notion that not only are we born equal in the sense nobody's ruling, we also have a right, a moral claim that we can make on behalf of that state. We do deserve to be equal and free and equally free.
Hey, JP.
And from that then comes the idea of a natural right to liberty, from which, in the founders' minds, all the other rights in one way or another can be derived. If you have a right to be free, not to be ruled by another, that means the right not to be assaulted, not to be killed by another, thus the right to life. If you have the right to be free to use your own mind and your own body to acquire property, that means you have a right to property. If you have a right not to be dominated in the way you worship God, that's a religious freedom right. The basic idea is all men are born free in the sense that everybody who is part of a government ought to have given that person his or her consent to be part of that government. Equality then can be understood to be a moral claim in two ways. One is it's about the moral rights and obligations of human beings to each other. And as I said just now, the basic right to liberty and all the other rights that follow from it. And the other is a claim about the right to rule. Who has the right to rule? Born equally free and independent means not born into a slave relationship or subordinate relationship. Understand, of course, when they talked about this, they didn't mean children. They always understood children are under the temporary control or wardship of their parents. But that was always understood to be a wardship that was a preparation for freedom once the children grow up. There was no idea of patriarchy throughout life in the founders' conception. Once you've reached the age of majority, let's say 21, typically in American law at that time, you're free of your parents. And from then on, you are free of everything unless it's the laws that you've given your consent to obey. And it's that consent, it's that giving of consent collectively that is what creates a nation, creates a people that is then to be governed by a particular form of government. Founders use the term social compact to mean the agreement we all make with each other, fellow citizens make with each other, to form a government and to accept the rules made by that government. And once you're in the social compact, you then become an exclusive body apart from the rest of humanity. And the government you're creating is for you, your fellow citizens, and protection of you and your rights. It's only not for the protection of the rest of mankind and their rights. So what does it mean to be free and equal in a day-to-day situation? I like to use the example of a job. When you apply for a job, you are saying to the employer, I have something valuable to offer you, my labor, and if you offer me something valuable, let's say pay, a salary, we'll make an agreement. And the agreement is an agreement between equals. I agree to be ruled by you insofar as I'm employed by you. You agree to pay me. And it's a relationship of subordination. It's not a relationship of permanent subordination. That would be slavery. An employment contract always has limits beyond which the employer is not allowed to go in order to protect the life, liberty, and property of the employee. But that's one example, a simple example of how equality works in practical life, in day-to-day life. Now, the idea of consent of the governed is fundamental to the founding, and in fact, the revolution itself was primarily fought in the name of consent, because it was the issue was, can the British impose taxes upon our people without the consent of our own locally elected legislative bodies? The answer was no, they can't. And that has to be, taxes and any form of government intrusion on our life, liberty, or property has to be with the agreement of the people who live under that government. And that has to be expressed through elected legislatures or through democracy where people get together in person, as say in a New England township. Now that consent, what did that actually mean in practice in terms of structuring government? Do we want to have a legislative body? Is it a good idea to have an executive? What about judging? What about courts? All of that had to be worked out and thrashed out, and that was an area where a lot of the disagreements in the founding came forward. There was a general agreement on consent in the form of elections, general agreement that government needed to have some kind of an executive for prosecutions, for directing the armed forces, for dealing with sudden problems like an uprising, or organizing the militia. But basically, there was agreement. The disagreements in terms of structure of government, I'm not going to go into today. That's going to be the topic of the next couple of talks in this series. What I'm going to focus on today is the subject of what government is supposed to do once it's conformed. The Declaration of Independence has a nice formulation. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. To secure these rights. What does that mean? What does security of rights mean? You can also look at the state constitutions and say, how did they describe the purpose of government? Was it the same? Was it security of rights? And the answer is, well, they use different language. One of the terms that was often used to explain the purpose of government is the word protection. Protection is what the government is supposed to do, meaning protection against harm to your own life, liberty, and property. And that protection has two sides. It's the side of the national government against the outsiders, potential foreign attack, and protection against your fellow citizens who might harm you, harm your life, liberty, or property because they're misbehaving. So protection. Let me just give you an example from the Virginia Declaration of Rights. Government ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the people, nation, or community. So that's what to secure these rights means. Protection, benefit of protection, and security of the people, nation, or community. Again, the emphasis is on our people. The government is not protecting people in Mexico or Canada or elsewhere in the world. That's a subject that is often misunderstood today. There's an assumption today that if there's human rights are universal, it's the job of every government in the world to protect rights all over the world. The founders rejected that idea completely and totally. Another example from the New Jersey Constitution preamble, the King of Great Britain has refused protection to the good people of these colonies, therefore we have a right to revolution. Refused protection. That was the one word. You're not protecting us against injury. And in fact, as New Jersey went on to say, is you're attacking us, you're harming us. You're harming our people. You're putting soldiers here and shooting at us. So then the question becomes, well, all right, what policies does the government have to adopt in order to do this protecting of the people? So the first point, of course, is protection against outsiders by means of armed forces, by means of what we call foreign policy, diplomacy, statecraft, negotiation, perhaps making alliances, but in the end, it comes down to, do you have soldiers in the field who can physically defeat a potential or an actual threat to the life, liberty, and property of American citizens? So this first part of government's protection or protective duty is about armed forces, and that, of course, does include border enforcement. One of the points of having a nation of your own is it's for the people who live here. Anyone who wants to come here has to ask permission, and permission is not automatic. It's given, again, by consent of the governed, by the consent of the people who live here. The idea of a universal right to immigrate to a nation that says, I don't want you here, founders would have said, no, that's immoral. That's a violation of the moral principle that all men are created equal, and that we, therefore, who have created our own government, have a moral right to say who will be our future fellow citizens. That's our duty and our right, not someone else's. The second part of protection, and what government has to do to protect, is to create laws against crimes. That's the most urgent part of the domestic politics side of the founders' argument. And so one of the topics that came up early on in America during the Revolution and in its aftermath was to create constitutions and laws to protect citizens. Criminal laws, for example. Jefferson had a great quote on that in his, he put together a proposed revision of the laws of the state of Virginia in 1778. In which he states that it's precisely because vicious and immoral men who try to take away the rights of other people that we have criminal law. And without criminal law, he said, the purpose of society would not be achieved, by which he meant protection and security of life, liberty, and property. So if you ask people today, sometimes I'll ask my students, how does the government secure our rights? They'll often give you a statement like, well, that's what the Supreme Court is for, and they have rules against discrimination and so on. Well, the founders would say, no, government protects your rights not just through the judiciary, but through all three branches of government. You have to have a legislature to make laws. You have to have an executive to carry out arrests and prosecutions and punishments, and a judiciary to decide, is this person who's accused by the government truly guilty or not guilty? You need all three branches. That's what makes government protection possible through criminal law. And that's what we see, occasionally there are TV shows based on this idea of, trials, people prosecute. That's how it's supposed to work. One of the characteristic features of government today in America is the deprioritization of criminal law enforcement. Not everywhere, but especially in major cities of America today, the ability of police and prosecutors to find criminals, prosecute them successfully, and have them punished is minimal. There are some cities in which the police, if they're called out on a theft, if you call the police and say, somebody stole something out of my house, they'll go, okay, we'll fill out a report for you. You can take it to the insurance company. But no, we're not going to look into it. Founding fathers would say, you guys don't get what government is for. It's for protection. And protection means you have to deter crime by making it clear to people who commit crimes, they're going to pay a penalty. So, figure out why, what's wrong? What happened? Why do our priorities somehow go somewhere else? And if you ask police departments today or prosecuting, they'll say, well, we don't have a budget for it. Which means something has gone wrong at the level of the state legislature or at the level of city government, where money is being spent on something that is of lower priority than actual protection of the lives and properties of citizens. That's a problem from the point of view of the founders, but it is the way we do government today. One could sum up the founders' conception of law enforcement that was developed during the Revolution in two phrases: equal protection of the laws and due process of law. Equal protection meaning, in the founders' view, equal protection meant when there's going to be a rule, a general rule that applies to everybody. It will define what crimes are and it'll say what the penalties are going to be. And government's duty is to provide equal protection. So no matter how wealthy the perpetrator might be, what race he might be, or the sex of the person committing the crime, government has the same obligation to prosecute and punish in the same way anyone who commits the crime. That's fundamental. But precisely because government is so strong and powerful when it's engaging in this activity of protecting, it also needs to follow procedures called due process of law, meaning you don't just take somebody and punish them without giving them a chance to defend themselves. So government has to prove its case, in theory at least, in court, for any significant punishment to take place. For a person to be deprived of liberty or property or money, trial, a right to defend, a right to call witnesses, a right to speak to cross-examine, to deal with whatever you need to do, bring forward whatever you need to bring forward in order to show, if you can, I didn't do that, I'm not guilty. Those two concepts, equal protection of the law and due process of law, were later embodied in the 14th Amendment, which was meant to take the basic founders' political theory of what government's supposed to do that was developed during the American Revolution, and then apply it to the states. Each state was, from then on, obliged by the federal Constitution to provide the same protection of the laws and of the due process of law that was already required and expected at the federal level in its own law enforcement jurisdiction. One of the early debates in America was over, do we need a federal government? And if so, what should be its scope and its powers? The founders came up with a very simple way of dividing up that labor. The federal government was going to be primarily responsible for foreign policy, and the state governments for domestic policy, with some exceptions. But basically, the federal government didn't really have a whole lot to do in early American history other than foreign policy. Now, there were some exceptions to that. The federal government was given some powers to regulate commerce, to maintain a national free market, and so on. But those were general exceptions. Generally, the states handled things having to do with property law, commerce, and contracts, things of that kind. And I'll be talking about that in a talk I give later on in the series. Today, when we teach American government in college, we often tend to focus on the national government. That's, of course, the exciting part, the big, the one that everybody notices. And of course, today, the feds have become so important, we tend to forget the role of the states, which still remains quite powerful even today. I believe the percentage of court cases that are handled at the federal and versus the state level is about over 90% still are state court cases. So most law enforcement, most legal issues come up not at the federal level at all. And that is how they designed it. And to that extent, there's to some extent, that same division of labor still prevails. One of the things that John Quincy Adams pointed out in a famous speech he gave on July 4th, 1821, was that the revolution, the American Revolution, had its heroes. And of course, everyone tends to think of things like George Washington, the other great generals of that period, the soldiers, the people who sacrificed their lives to create an independent nation. And that's true, Adams says. That was true. But what he adds to that is, he says, there are other people who were also heroes of the American Revolution. And we don't tend to acknowledge that. Those are the people, he said, who figured out how to write the constitutions and the laws, state and federal, that have given us our liberty and enable us to sustain that liberty. He says they're heroes too, because that's not easy to do. I want to conclude this talk by asking the question, what then was America meant to be at the time of the founding? And I want to emphasize again, ideas are not people. The ideas of the American Revolution were indeed unique to the American Revolution, but those ideas are meant to be universal for all mankind. But it was a particular people. It was these people over in America, the British settlers, other Europeans were here, predominantly Europeans, who made the nation what it was. And they were not randomly assembled from all around the world. One of the things the founders were very conscious of is how difficult it is to establish and sustain a political regime that is going to be a free regime, a free regime of freedom. John Jay in Federalist 2 points out that that Americans really do belong together, not just because they hold the same political principles, and he does mention that, but also because they are, quote, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs. And Jay's point partly was, if it hadn't been for all those things we already had in common prior to forming the Union, we might not have been able to do it. Liberty is only possible to be established in the founders' minds if the people are capable of supporting liberty and living according to the requirements of liberty. There are many cultures in the world today, and there were then too, where the people who live in these places don't like freedom and have no experience of freedom. The founders, in fact, doubted openly whether places like Latin America or even some places in Europe could ever maintain a regime of political freedom. Natural rights belong to everyone in the founders' view, but you have the right, obviously, you have the right to create a free country, but you don't always have the ability to. It depends on who lives there and what their attitudes are and how good their leadership is.
Exactly, Wayne.
In some cases, the founders pointed out you can't have consent of the governed if you're going to have any kind of protection of the rights of the individual. There was a revolution in Haiti that took place during the 1790s, and people in the founding were saying they're not going to be able to have a free government there. They're not going to have you can't have an elective government in Haiti. Probably a military despotism is the best they're going to do. That was a quote from Hamilton. And Jefferson held the same view when he was asked about Latin America in the 1820s. He said, look, this is a place that's going to be really difficult to form any kind of solid, lasting, free government there. I hope they can do it, he said. They ought to. They deserve it, but it's going to be tough. The founders had answers as to how to keep the population morally capable of being free. They didn't think it would work everywhere, but they did think it would work here. I'll talk about that later in the series. Thank you.
I only found these two, but it's very informative, and this is something that should be taught at every single school. It should be a requirement for this country. No slacking. There's so many people who disrespect the Constitution, and these people do not understand, or they don't want to understand, what the Constitution is there for. It is for everybody's rights and freedoms, including theirs, and they're wanting to destroy that. They don't understand. You go to like Venezuela, they don't have what we have. They don't have a constitution. They are suppressed. They can be detained for no reason whatsoever. And these kids out there today, and adults who are rioting and with Antifa, don't get it, or they don't care. And it's their loss. They need to be found. They need this document. They need to understand, get it through their head, what this country stands for. It is so important these days. There are still a few schools that I have seen that still have the American flag, They still respect the Constitution. They still teach the Constitution. They teach right history. Not very many do that, unfortunately, and we need to get back to this. If anything, Betsy DeVos needs to get going and make this an absolutely requirement to graduate. No exceptions. Today, the president and vice president had a let's see here. I want to make sure I get the right one. Had a how do you want to say, a roundtable of history.
A day in which we celebrate the work of genius that's preserved in these very halls. 233 years ago today, our founders completed what for them was the work of a nation, but for humanity, a work for the ages, the Constitution of the United States of America.
True, right, Wayne.
For the first time in history, a government was founded by we the people to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for themselves and their posterity. John Adams, our first vice president, aptly described our Constitution in his words as, quote, the single greatest effort of national deliberation that the world has ever seen. And so it was. But we all know the summer of 1787 didn't just happen. It was preceded by the summer of 1776 and the signing of our Declaration of Independence, whose magisterial words continue to echo into our time, that we as Americans hold certain truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. With those words, America laid the foundations for a government whose purpose, in the words of President Abraham Lincoln, was, and I quote, to elevate the condition of men, to lift artificial weights from all shoulders, to clear the paths of laudable pursuit for all. As the words inscribed on the walls of these national archives read, this building holds in trust the records of our national life, symbolizes our faith in the permanency of our national institutions. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution are the greatest charters of freedom the world has ever known. The character of our people and the principles enshrined there are the reason for our nation's unparalleled success. And they remain the greatest bulwark against tyranny in history. And the reason is simple. Our founders knew history. Sadly, we live in a time when too many are forgetting history today. Thomas Jefferson warned that, quote, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. But sadly, we live in a time when some seek to erase our history and deny our nation's relentless march toward a more perfect union. As President Trump has observed, in too many of our schools and universities, millions of young people are educated by those who seek to wipe out our history, defame our heroes, erase our values, and indoctrinate our children. But we gather here today, soon to hear from the President of the United States, as Americans who are committed to affirming the greatness of this nation and the ideals of our founders.
Amen.
Our president understands what we all understand. If we don't teach the next generation the principles enshrined in these halls, we can't expect them to preserve them. No one can preserve what they do not love, and no one can love what they do not know. That's why on this Constitution Day, our president will reaffirm our commitment to the principles and liberties that this administration has championed from day one, and take measurable steps to ensure that future generations will continue to understand the historical and philosophical roots of our nation. What we do here today is a part of our ongoing commitment to ensure that the rising generation will be able to do their part, as we know they will, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. And this we know they will do, because these principles are not just enshrined in these national archives, they're enshrined in the hearts of the American people. And I know these great principles will prevail because, like our president, I have faith in the American people. And I have faith that he who guided our founders on this day 233 years ago guides us still. For as the father of our Constitution, James Madison, reflected on this day, and I quote, "It is impossible not to perceive in it a finger of that almighty hand which has been so frequently and signally extended to our relief at critical stages of the revolution." So it's Constitution Day in America. And with gratitude to all of those who have gone before, and gratitude to all of you who are gathered here, who love and cherish our heritage of freedom. With gratitude to God who has ever guided the destiny of this land. And gratitude to a president who has ever championed the freedoms and ideals enshrined in this place. It is now my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you the 45th President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, great Vice President. I'm truly honored to be here at the very first White House conference on American history, so important. Our mission is to defend the legacy of America's founding, the virtue of America's heroes, and the nobility of the American character. We must clear away the twisted web of lies in our schools and classrooms and teach our children the magnificent truth about our country. We want our sons and daughters to know that they are the citizens of the most exceptional nation in the history of the world.
Indeed.
To grow up in America is to live in a land where anything is possible, where anyone can rise, and where any dream can come true, all because of the immortal principles of our nation's founders, inscribed nearly 2.5 centuries ago. That's why we've come to the National Archives, the sacred home of our national memory. In this great chamber, we preserve our glorious inheritance, the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. On this very day in 1787, our founding fathers signed the Constitution at Independence Hall in Philadelphia. It was the fulfillment of 1,000 years of Western civilization. Our Constitution was the product of centuries of tradition, wisdom, and experience. No political document has done more to advance the human condition or propel the engine of progress. Yet as we gather this afternoon, a radical movement is attempting to demolish this treasured and precious inheritance. We can't let that happen.
No, sir. We will prevail.
Left-wing mobs have torn down statues of our founders, desecrated our memorials, and carried out a campaign of violence and anarchy. Far-left demonstrators have chanted the words, "America was never great." The left has launched a vicious and violent assault on law enforcement, the universal symbol of the rule of law in America. These radicals have been aided and abetted by liberal politicians, establishment media, and even large corporations. Whether it is the mob on the street or the cancel culture in the boardroom, the goal is the same: to silence dissent, to scare you out of speaking the truth, and to bully Americans into abandoning their values, their heritage, and their very way of life. We are here today to declare that we will never submit to tyranny. We will reclaim our history and our country for citizens of every race, color, religion, and creed. The radicals burning American flags want to burn down the principles enshrined in our founding documents, including the bedrock principle of equal justice under law. In order to radically transform America, they must first cause Americans to lose confidence in who we are, where we came from, and what we believe. As I said at Mount Rushmore, which they would love to rip down and rip it down fast, that's never going to happen. 2 months ago, the left-wing cultural revolution was designed to overthrow the American Revolution. As many of you testified today, the left-wing rioting and mayhem are the direct result of decades of left-wing indoctrination in our schools. It's gone on far too long. Our children are instructed from propaganda tracks like those of Howard Zinn that try to make students ashamed of their own history. The left has warped, distorted, and defiled the American story with deceptions, falsehoods, and lies. There is no better example than the New York Times totally discredited 1619 Project. This project rewrites American history to teach our children that we were founded on the principle of oppression, not freedom. Nothing could be further from the truth. America's founding set in motion the unstoppable chain of events that abolished slavery, secured civil rights, defeated communism and fascism, and built the most fair, equal, and prosperous nation in human history. The narratives about America being pushed by the far left and being chanted in the streets bear a striking resemblance to the anti-American propaganda of our adversaries, because both groups want to see America weakened, derided, and totally diminished. Students in our universities are inundated with critical race theory. This is a Marxist doctrine holding that America is a wicked and racist nation, that even young children are complicit in oppression, and that our entire society must be radically transformed. Critical race theory is being forced into our children's schools. It's being imposed into workplace trainings, and it's being deployed to rip apart friends, neighbors, and families. A perfect example of critical race theory was recently published by the Smithsonian Institution. This document alleged that concepts such as hard work, rational thinking, and the nuclear family and belief in God were not values that unite all Americans, but were instead aspects of whiteness. This is offensive and outrageous to Americans of every ethnicity, and it's especially harmful to children of minority backgrounds who should be uplifted, not disparaged. Teaching this horrible doctrine to our children is a form of child abuse in the truest sense of those words.
True.
For many years now, the radicals have mistaken Americans' silence for weakness, but they're wrong. There is no more powerful force than a parent's love for their children, and patriotic moms and dads are going to demand that their children are no longer fed hateful lies about this country. American parents are not going to accept indoctrination in our schools, cancel culture in our work, or the repression of traditional faith, culture, and values in the public square. Not anymore. Thank you. Thank you very much. We embrace the vision of Martin Luther King, where children are not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. The left is attempting to destroy that beautiful vision and divide Americans by race in the service of political power. By viewing every issue through the lens of race, they want to impose a new segregation, and we must not allow that to happen. Critical race theory,
Hello,
the
US
1619
2020.
Project, and the crusade against American history is toxic propaganda, ideological poison that, if not removed, will dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together, will destroy our country. That is why I recently banned trainings in this prejudiced ideology from the federal government and banned it in the strongest manner possible. The only path to national unity is through our shared identity as Americans. That is why it is so urgent that we finally restore patriotic education to our schools. Under our leadership, the National
Yes, they're
Endowment
here.
for the Humanities has awarded a grant to support the development of a pro-American curriculum that celebrates the truth about our nation's great history. We are joined by some of the respected scholars involved in this project, including Professor Wilford McClay,
Very true. Education is important.
Please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Dr. Peter Wood of the National Association of Scholars. Dr. Peter. Thank you. Thank you. And Ted Rebarber. Thank you, Ted. Thank you very much, Ted. Today, I'm also pleased to announce that I will soon sign an executive order establishing a national commission to promote patriotic education.
Awesome.
It will be called the 1776 Commission.
I did not know this. Love it.
Thank you. It will encourage our educators to teach our children about the miracle of American history and make plans to honor the 250th anniversary of our founding. Think of that, 250 years. Recently, I also signed an executive order to establish the National Garden of American Heroes, a vast outdoor park that will feature the statues of the greatest Americans who have ever lived. Today, I'm announcing a new name for inclusion. One of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence was a patriot from Delaware. In July of 1776, the Continental Congress was deadlocked during the debate over independence. The delegation from Delaware was divided. Caesar Rodney was called upon to break the tie, even though he was suffering from very advanced cancer. He was deathly ill. Rodney rode 80 miles through the night, through a severe thunderstorm, from Dover to Philadelphia to cast his vote for independence. For nearly a century, a statue of one of Delaware's most beloved citizens stood in Rodney Square, right in the heart of Wilmington. But this past June, Caesar Rodney's statue was ordered removed by the mayor and local politicians as part of a radical purge of America's founding generation. Today, because of an order I signed, if you demolish a statue without permission, you immediately get 10 years in prison.
Man works endless.
And there have been no statues demolished for the last 4 months, incredibly, since the time I signed that act. Joe Biden said nothing as to his home state's history and the fact that it was dismantled, dismembered, and a founding father statue was removed. Today, America will give this founding father, this very brave man who was so horribly treated, the place of honor he deserves. I'm announcing that the statue of Caesar Rodney will be added to the National Guard of American Heroes.
Awesome.
From Washington to Lincoln, from Jefferson to King, America has been home to some of the most incredible people who have ever lived. With the help of everyone here today, the legacy of 1776 will never be erased. Our heroes will never be forgotten, Our youth will be taught to love America with all of their heart and all of their soul. We will save this cherished inheritance for our children, for their children, and for every generation to come. This is a very important day. Thank you all once again for being here. Now I will sign the Constitution Day proclamation. God bless you and God bless America. Thank you very much.
I did not see this today. That is a wonderful surprise. That is just what this country needs. This is one man who has put his heart and soul to this country. He loves it from the bottom of his heart. All right. Very good news. Good news. Oops. Oh, what's they say? So does Israel control him with... You know, you're welcome to have your opinion, and that's what's in the Constitution, freedom of speech, but it doesn't give you the right to come in here and be insulting. If you want to ask a question normally, you are more than welcome. I have no problem, but I don't allow insults like last night or the night before. You can talk to anybody if they want to respond to you, civil. That's all I ask. Israel does not control him. On that great note, Anita King was actually on Fox and Friends. Now, with all the unrest and Black Lives Matter, I think Martin Luther King would be very disappointed in people today. They have smeared and denigrate. They have denigrate his legacy of peace, everybody living together in harmony and everything. And it's a shame. And here is Anita King. Or Alveda, excuse me.
Here now is Alveda King. She is niece of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. She's also a Fox News contributor, and she has a new book out. We Are Not Colorblind, Healing the Racial Divide. I can't think of a better reason to have you on today. You know,
we've got to vote early, in person if we can. We've got to request our mail-in
Oh,
ballots
nobody
right
cares.
now, tonight.
Not you. Don't care about you. You are one of the people that is the part of the problem, is her.
these different places. And we hear our presidential candidates, sort of battling back and forth about it. What could either of them actually do to help working families?
Melissa, I'm so glad that you've asked that question. And sometimes I almost shudder to think if we had had anyone else other than a real serious, successful businessman as president of the United States at this time,
No.
we really would be in a worse situation than we're in. COVID, you haven't seen anything like that for years and years and years, that type of pandemic. And then the race wars, and to have them both at the same time. So I'm very grateful that President Trump, I'll talk about both candidates, but to begin to stabilize the economy. Either candidate, both candidates would have to do that. I haven't heard a real plan from Joe Biden because his thing is let's spend more government money, do more for the people with the government money and the taxes. That tends to be the way that Mr. Biden thinks. President Trump says, let's keep people working. Let's make sure that people are safe. And he's doing a real good job with that, stabilizing that economy, giving SBA loans and PPP plans and the opportunity zones, money to historically Black colleges and universities. When the criminal justice situation, when people are coming out of jail, making sure that they can be employed and have something to do. So both candidates would have to pay close attention to the economy.
Why do you say that Vice President Joe Biden spending more money wouldn't work? Because in fact, he spoke earlier in the day and he did say that. I mean, that was, we've got to spend money on schools, that we've got to send money out to people. All of his solutions involved really big government spending. Why is that not the answer?
If you're taking all of the money from the tax dollars without stabilizing the economy and making sure that you're working with the private sector, that they're stabilized and balanced and are willing to continue to work and to have their businesses safe and their businesses prospering so that people can have money, then of course you can spend more tax dollars. But if everybody is locked up at home, can't go to work, the people who do have businesses, if their businesses are being attacked, bombed, shut down, people are outside screaming and hollering and you can't get into the businesses, then there is no more money to give away. So it's not really giving away money. When you have a healthy economy, everyone is working and participating in the economy. And then you can help the colleges, the universities, the returning citizens, and the schools. A businessman understands that. But I'm really not hearing that from Joe Biden.
Yeah. When we look at our cities around the country, we'll use New York as an example.
Yeah, did you notice her reaction? Yeah. Yeah, she's really agreeing there. Now, reading the marquee on the bottom, the mayor could have put that down from the first day. She knew better. This is all her fault of the governor of Portland, or mayor of Portland. And see, this is what's happened to Fox. It's kind of like she is not even interested in what Ms. King has to say. You can look at her face.
Because we had a restaurant owner on yesterday from Harlem who had a historic restaurant. She employs more than 100 people. It's Sylvia's in Harlem. It's delicious as well as being a historical landmark. Mayor de Blasio is not allowing her to open up and have people come inside. He says this is an upper class problem, that you can't go out to dinner. Oh, poor people. And he doesn't seem to realize what it means to working people at the restaurant and those owners, who are working so hard, and so many are minority. I mean, what do you say to those local leaders who don't get that?
The mayor has an elitist attitude. Sylvia's is a historic restaurant. I've been to Sylvia's, and as a matter of fact, she used to have one in Atlanta, Georgia as well. And so in today's world, people do eat at restaurants. That's not an upper class situation. Many people do. And so for him to say, oh, well, that's just for the upper class, and so we don't have to worry about that. And there are other businesses that are just two barbershops, beauty salons, and just so many other businesses that people rely on and depend on. And so they can't get in and out of their businesses. The businesses are being firebombed and threatened, not by the people who run the businesses, not by the people in the community, but the outside agitators who go in to threaten and destroy. And in some cities now, people are running around to the various neighborhoods and said, give us your keys, give us your house. You don't have a right to live in this house, give us your house. So if you have a very unstable community like that, and you're not allowing people to go to work and go to school and to continue with a normal life, and that's why I said a businessman gets this. And he would say, stabilize that. He stabilized the jobs, and then we can work with money from taxes and things like that. And the business owners are still willing to stay in the community and not leave. You don't want businesses to go away and shut down.
No, that's the key.
Yeah.
Alveda King, thank you for coming on with your wisdom again. We appreciate it.
What you all know.
Now, when we'll get on the topic of the restaurants and other businesses, New York has lost, God only knows how many businesses. It will be very difficult to bring back. If they want change, they have the will to change. They need to get rid of their governor. They need to get rid of their mayor. That's just as simple as it goes. Go red. New York, rise up, vote Republican. Get those people out of there. You want a decent life. You want safety in your state. Vote Republican and get them out. As for everybody else, there's still many businesses are just going out. They cannot sustain this. And it's mainly blue states, as usual. Yeah, there's a couple of minute red states, but nothing like the blues. They have overstepped their authority, as they always do. They're grabbing for power. And the only way the people are going to change this is re-electing President Trump, gain the House, and keep the Senate. All Republican. All branches need to go. This is not going to be an easy fight. We need to fight for this, because the Dems are going to cheat. It's that simple. When it comes to the little thug rat bastards over in Oregon, they need to maybe think about restructuring their police department, maybe just a little. Let's see how the Brits do it.
All right, Goody, what's all this? Another promising contender for the regional heats of...
You want to know what really makes me enjoy my day? Walking in Skechers' new Arch Fit footwear. Skechers teamed up...
Young delinquent of the year? What have you been up to, Sonny?
I ain't been up to nothing.
In which case, you must have been up to something. Find the English language serves you far better, laddie, if you use it properly. So, what's he been up to?
Taking without consent, Gov hit a lamppost.
Don't call me Gov, laddie. It's a short step from saying Gov to using Cockney rhyming slang, and I won't have it.
Sorry, Chief.
You're even thinking about being sick on my desk. First think about removing this truncheon from your ear hole.
Has the doctor been called?
On his way, Gov. Chief, boss, sir.
I've called Inspector Grimm, sir. He has to be informed if we picked up any joyriders.
Joyrider is not a term I will allow in my station, Constable. This young lout was involved in potentially murderous delinquency.
Well, I'm sorry, Inspector. I was only saying...
I know what you were only saying, Constable. But it's not good enough. Crime is crime and should not be trivialized. What next? Are we to refer to grievous bodily harm as fun punching? Assault with a deadly weapon as a laugh and a stab?
Occupation?
Ducking, diving, dodging, weaving.
So I'll just put total prat, shall I?
All right, Nigel Mansell, empty out your pockets.
You ain't got no right to search me.
Now there you are wrong. I have every right to search you. Indeed, if I suspect you of possessing drugs, I'm entitled to conduct an internal body search involving a rubber glove and a large spoon. Would you like me to suspect you of possessing drugs? So, 1 ballpoint pen, blue, 1 contraceptive device, aniseed flavoured, 2 tickets to a rave, hardly a professional's carpentering kit. I fear Inspector Grimm will find slim pickings here.
I can't take any more! I did for someone, I swear! You're all dead!
Yes, sir, can I help?
Smack! Gotta have smack!
Certainly. Goody, the gentleman wants a smack.
2, 4, 6, 8, book into whip! Oh! Handcuffs, please.
Constable Goody, are you chewing? I'm going to ask you that question again, Goody. But before I do so, I want you to consider the consequences of deliberately lying to a superior officer whilst on duty. Those consequences include dismissal, loss of pension, ostracism within the community, and in all probability a lifelong dependency on prescription antidepressants. Now let's try again. Are you chewing, laddie?
Yes, I am.
Helps me think. I can't say I'd noticed.
He's cuffed, sir.
All right, Abby, well done. Take the man down. Cold showers, exercise, and regular roughage help a man think, Goody. Not Wrigley's juicy fruit. Not how my officers going about the place like louts.
They know how to handle little punks like that. So when you're thinking of who should you vote for, think Trump. Because we have more people just walking away every day.
Hello, my walk-away friends and my walk-away family. I have not done a video yet. And I have been working the streets, and I have been talking to people, and I was trying to find the right time.
After 15 months, U.S. Attorney John Durham has filed the first criminal charge and his
To do my own video. And as more people are coming into the movement, and we've started with, our state moderators and our state leaders and our activists. Today, I attended 2 Back the Blue rallies. And here's a couple of observations that I've made. Number one, there's a heck of a lot of patriots out there. There's a heck of a lot of people out there that love this country. And they're not afraid to show it. And you shouldn't be afraid to show it either. Number one. Number two, I was walking back to my car, and there was a police car standing there. And as I walked by, he rolled down his window. And he said, "I just want to thank you." And when I looked at him closely, he had tears in his eyes. And it broke my heart. And so we talked a little bit, and he was just watching what was going on, making sure that we were safe. And he was just sitting in his car. And I was so taken back by this man who has served his town and served his country. And this is what he's been reduced to. And I know from talking from this officer, he is a stand-up guy. So I got back in my car, and I was just watching him. And I was thinking about Brandon down in Philadelphia today, who is an incredible leader. And we should all not be afraid to follow him, and we should all not be afraid to speak out. And I had made up these buttons that said, "Walk away, backs the blue." So I went back to the officer, and he rolled down his window, and I said, "I just want you to have this button so that when you're sitting in a car and somebody's yelling at you, calling you names, I want you to look at this button, and I want you to think of how many of us out here love you guys and support you guys." And this guy was fighting back tears. And we both hugged. And I said to him, "Please be safe. And please know that there are so many more of us out here that love what you do and understand how hard of a job you have. And that we are here to stop this hate." And he was so appreciative. And really, I've been in this movement for a while, and I didn't do my video yet because I didn't feel compelled. Plus, Brendan keeps me pretty busy trying to get everything going off the ground in the New England area. But today, after that experience with that police officer, and just talking to regular people that just showed up, how much passion there is and love out there for this country, we have to stand up.
Indeed.
You have to find your brave side. You have to get out of your comfort zone and go and show your support for these men and women.
Mm-hmm.
I had another standout today I had an Army sergeant that walked by and was asking me about Walk Away and what we stood for, and he was floored. And he too was emotional when he saw us all standing out and supporting our country. And he was telling me how he had just gotten back from Afghanistan and how important it was to him. And I believe it. So listen up, folks. All you Walk Away people that have signed on, it's time to step up.
That's right.
It's time. It's now or never. And if you are interested, there's always something we can find for you to do. And I want you to support this movement because this movement is about accepting everybody for who they are. It's okay to disagree. And let's bring out the best in America. We can do this. There are a loud bunch out there that don't like this country, but I know that the silent majority is strong. And if they get pushed too hard and they blow, these people aren't going to know what hit them. You can feel it in the air. And when I see a police officer sitting in his car with tears in his eyes because he sees everyday Americans coming out, standing in the rain, I'm drenched. I'm not camera ready for this at all, but I don't care because it's that important. So, all of you, step up, stand up, support your country.
Amen.
As hard as it gets, because it's going to get harder until November. But you got to do it. So I just want to say, stay safe out there. When you see a law enforcement person, you go up to them and you thank them.
Amen.
And you say, thank you for protecting our country and for protecting us. Not all of them are bad.
Absolutely.
Not all of them are bad. The majority of them are wonderful, wonderful people who really, truly care about you and I. So let's do this. Grab a sign, get to a standout. If you can't do that, donate. Donate to walkawaycampaign.com. Help us get this done. Help us take back our country and help us rescue America. Thank you all for listening. God bless. Be safe out there and get involved.
I think that's great advice. Movie time in the chat says somebody on the coronavirus task force flipped. Was it Fauci? I wouldn't be surprised. That's pretty much a shame. I hope they get rid of him because he's no use to us. If that's the way they want to be, so be it. It's their right. Get the hell off the team. Thank you very much. I will open the chest on DLive for everybody in there. God bless the President of the United States, Vice President, military, law enforcement especially. God bless you. Thank you for everything that you do. We really do appreciate you very much. And take some advice from that lady out there in internet land or wherever you're watching this. Get a flag. I have a blue flag out for the law enforcement in the area. There you go, Becca. 33 lemons. Movie time 19. Support the men and women of the law enforcement in any way you can. God bless the military and the men and women of the medical field, doctors, nurses, first responders, and Border Patrol and Coast Guard. Thank you very much for joining. Remember to follow on DLive, Periscope, Twitch, Twitter, possibly YouTube, depends, and Facebook. I'm working on a different channel, so have to wait and see what happens. God bless all of you. I do appreciate every single one of you very much. It's flattering, and I'm touched that you tune in. And I hope to see you next time as well. I will look to play the rest of that Constitution Day video, the second part. I just don't have enough time right now. And I will see you all very, very soon. I will try to get on, let's see, maybe tomorrow I could probably do, more than likely. And everybody have a safe and happy tomorrow. Sorry, it's Friday. God bless y'all. Appreciate you. Oh, everybody, hold the line. Steady. Let's fight. Every single patriot out there. Red pill as many as you can. God bless you. We must continue the fight even after the election. We have to make sure we will win. We will prevail.